The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as hundreds of families filled the red velvet seats of Westfield High School. Lisa Martinez adjusted her navy blue dress for the third time, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed the fabric over her knees. After 18 years of marriage and countless school events, she should have felt comfortable in these settings, but today felt different. Today, their son Jake was graduating, and the weight of this milestone pressed against her, chest like a physical force. "You look beautiful, honey," her husband David whispered, his breath warm against her ear as he settled into the seat beside her. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a gesture that once would have sent butterflies dancing through her stomach. Now his touch felt mechanical, rehearsed, like an actor playing a role he'd grown tired of performing. Lisa forced a smile, the kind she'd perfected over years of PTA meetings and neighborhood barbecues. "Thank you. I can't believe our baby is graduating." Her voice caught on the last word, emotion threatening to spill over despite her best efforts to maintain composure. Around them, the auditorium continued to fill with proud parents, grandparents, and siblings. Cell phones were already emerging from purses and pockets, positioned for the perfect shot. Lisa's own phone sat in her lap, ready to capture every moment of Jake's walk across the stage. She'd spent the morning charging it, clearing storage, space, and testing the camera settings. This was their moment, Jake's moment, and she refused to miss a single second. "Lisa, David." The familiar voice of Margaret Chen, another parent from their neighborhood, cut through the ambient noise. Margaret navigated the crowded aisle with practiced ease, her husband trailing behind with a professional-looking camera draped around his neck. "Can you believe it? 18 years just flew by, didn't it?" Lisa stood to embrace her friend, grateful for the distraction from her own racing thoughts. "It really did. I swear Jake was just learning to tie his shoes yesterday, and now he's heading to Northwestern in the fall." "Northwestern, that's fantastic." Margaret's enthusiasm was genuine, her eyes lighting up with the shared joy that comes from watching children achieve their dreams. "Tom's going to community college first, but we're so proud. College is college, right?" "Absolutely," Lisa agreed, meaning every word. She'd watched Tom Chen grow up alongside Jake, had seen him struggle with dyslexia in elementary school, work twice as hard as his peers in middle school, and finally find his stride in high school. Every child's journey was different, every achievement worth celebrating. David's phone buzzed against his leg, and Lisa noticed how quickly he pulled it out, his attention immediately diverted from the conversation. His thumb moved rapidly across the screen, typing what looked like a lengthy message. The blue glow of the device illuminated his face, highlighting the fine lines around his eyes that seemed to have deepened over the past year. "Work emergency?" Lisa asked, though she already knew the answer. David's construction company had been booming lately, keeping him at the office well past dinner time most nights. Weekend calls were becoming more frequent, and their conversations had dwindled to logistics about Jake's college preparations and household maintenance. "Just coordinating tomorrow's job site," he replied without looking up. "Johnson wants to move the timeline up by 2 weeks. I need to make sure we have enough crew." Margaret's husband Tom had wandered off to find better seats, leaving the women to continue their conversation. "How are you handling the empty nest syndrome?" Margaret asked, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "I'm already dreading it, and Tom's not even leaving for another year." Lisa's throat tightened. She'd been asking herself the same question for months, though she'd been too afraid to voice it aloud. What would she and David talk about when Jake was gone? What would fill the space that had been occupied by soccer practices, school projects, and college applications for the past 18 years? "I'm trying not to think about it too much," Lisa admitted. "Jake's been my whole world for so long. I keep telling myself it's exciting. He's going to do amazing things. But the house is going to feel so empty. You and David will have time to reconnect," Margaret offered with a knowing smile. "Maybe take that trip to Europe you've been talking about forever. Remember how you used to say you'd visit every museum in Paris once Jake was grown? Lisa nodded, though the dream felt distant now, like something she'd imagined rather than planned. She and David had talked about travel extensively during their early marriage, poring over guidebooks and making lists of destinations. Somewhere along the way, those conversations had stopped, replaced by discussions about mortgage refinancing and retirement savings. The auditorium lights dimmed, signaling the beginning of the ceremony. David finally put his phone away, though Lisa noticed he kept it face up on his lap, ready for the next interruption. The principal took the stage, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system as she welcomed the gathered families. Ladies and gentlemen, parents, grandparents, and friends, welcome to Westfield High School's Class of 2024 graduation ceremony. Today, we celebrate not just the achievements of our graduates, but the journey that brought them here, and the bright futures that await them. Lisa's heart swelled with pride as she spotted Jake in the sea of blue caps and gowns. Even from a distance, she could see his nervous energy, the way he kept adjusting his cap and smoothing his gown. He'd inherited her tendency toward perfectionism, always wanting everything to be just right for important moments. The ceremony proceeded with the familiar rhythm of high school graduations everywhere. There were speeches from the valedictorian and salutatorian, words of wisdom from the principal, and a keynote address from a local business owner who'd graduated from Westfield 30 years earlier. Lisa tried to focus on each speaker, but her mind kept wandering to the future. Jake's future, her future, the uncertain terrain of marriage without the common ground of active parenting. And now, the principal announced, please welcome our graduating class of 2024. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers as 247 18-year-olds filed onto the stage area. Lisa's phone was already recording, capturing Jake's confident stride as he took his place among his classmates. She'd been preparing for this moment for months, but the reality of it still took her breath away. He looks so grown up, she whispered to David, who nodded but seemed distracted, his eyes scanning the crowd rather than focusing on their son. David? Lisa prompted when he didn't respond. What? Oh yes. Very grown up. His voice lacked the emotion she'd expected, the pride that should have been evident on such a momentous day. Instead, he seemed almost detached, as if he were watching someone else's child graduate. The alphabet crawl began, and Lisa's anxiety mounted as they approached the M's. Martinez, Jake. Her son would be walking across that stage in just a few minutes, shaking hands with the principal, receiving his diploma, officially becoming a high school graduate. The moment she'd been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. Lisa. David's voice was suddenly close to her ear again, but this time his tone was different. Serious, urgent. I need to talk to you about something, after the ceremony. Her stomach dropped, though she couldn't have explained why. Can't it wait? This is Jake's day. It's important. Something in his voice made her turn to look at him fully. His jaw was set in a way she recognized, the same expression he wore when delivering bad news to clients about construction delays or cost overruns. It was his business face, the one he used when emotion needed to be set aside in favor of facts. David, what's wrong? We'll talk later, he said firmly, turning his attention back to the stage just as the principal called out. Jake Martinez. Lisa's heart exploded with pride and joy as her son walked across the stage, his smile radiant even from a distance. She stood with the rest of the crowd, cheering and applauding, her phone capturing every step of his journey from one side of the stage to the other. This was the moment she'd been working toward for 18 years, the culmination of countless parent-teacher conferences, homework battles, and sleepless nights worrying about his future. But even as she celebrated Jake's achievement, David's words echoed in her mind. The serious tone, the insistence that it couldn't wait, the way he'd been distant and distracted all morning. It all pointed to something significant, something that would change everything. The ceremony concluded with the traditional tossing, of caps, a moment of pure joy and celebration that Lisa tried to fully experience despite her growing anxiety. Families began making their way toward the exits, moving in slow waves as everyone attempted to locate their graduates in the crowd of blue gowns and mortarboards. There he is. Lisa spotted Jake first, his height making him visible above many of his classmates. She waved enthusiastically, and his face lit up when he saw her. In that moment, all her worries faded away. This was her son, her greatest achievement, and nothing could diminish the pride she felt watching him navigate through the crowd toward them. Jake enveloped her in a hug that lifted her off the ground, spinning her around as he'd done when he was younger, and she was smaller. "Mom, can you believe it? I'm actually done. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." Lisa managed through tears she hadn't realized were falling. So incredibly proud. David stepped forward for his own hug, and Lisa watched as father and son embraced. There was genuine affection there, but also something else, a finality that seemed premature for a graduation day. David held Jake a beat longer than usual, as if memorizing the moment. "Congratulations, son. You did it." "Thanks, Dad. And thanks for being here, both of you. I know how busy you've been with work." Lisa caught the slight emphasis on work, and wondered if Jake had noticed his father's preoccupation as well. Children were often more perceptive than parents realized, picking up on tensions and changes that adults thought they were hiding. "Nothing could have kept us away from this," Lisa assured him, meaning every word. "This is one of the most important days of your life." The crowd was beginning to thin as families made their way to cars and restaurants for celebration dinners. Lisa had made reservations at Jake's favorite steakhouse, a tradition they'd started when he made the honor roll in middle school. It was supposed to be a perfect day, a celebration of achievement and family. "So, are we ready for dinner?" Jake asked, his graduation cap now hanging from his finger as he looked between his parents. "I'm starving, and I've been thinking about those loaded potato skins all week." "Actually," David interjected, his voice taking on that same serious tone from earlier, "your mom and I need to talk first. Why don't you go ahead and wait in the car?" Jake's expression shifted, confusion replacing his earlier joy. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Lisa said quickly, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "Your dad just needs to discuss something with me. We'll be right there." As Jake walked away, Lisa felt a chill run down her spine, despite the warm June evening. The parking lot was still crowded with families loading into cars, graduation caps, and gowns creating a sea of blue against the backdrop of minivans and SUVs. Children ran between the vehicles, their laughter echoing off the asphalt, while parents tried to corral them for family photos. David waited until Jake was out of earshot before turning to face her. The expression on his face was one she'd never seen before. A mixture of determination and something that looked almost like pity. "Lisa, I've been thinking about this for a long time," he began, his voice steady but lacking warmth. "About us, about our marriage, about what happens next." Her heart began to race, though she tried to tell herself this could be about anything. Maybe he wanted to discuss their finances, or Jake's college expenses, or plans for renovating the house now that they'd have more time. "What about us?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "I want a divorce." The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs and making her legs feel unsteady. Around them, the celebration continued. Families, laughing, taking pictures, planning dinner reservations. But Lisa felt suddenly isolated, as if she were watching the scene from behind glass. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "I want a divorce, Lisa. I've been unhappy for a long time, and I think you have been too, even if you won't admit it. We've grown apart. We don't want the same things anymore. And now that Jake's graduating, there's no reason to keep pretending that casual cruelty of his timing struck her like a slap. "You're telling me this now?" At our son's graduation? I thought it would be better to be honest. To start fresh. Jake's 18 now. He's going to college. He doesn't need us to stay together for his sake anymore. Lisa stared at him, this man she'd loved for over 20 years, and felt like she was seeing a stranger. I can't believe you're doing this. Not today. Not like this. When would have been better? David's voice remained frustratingly calm, as if they were discussing vacation plans rather than the end of their marriage. Jake's been our focus for so long that we forgot how to be a couple. We're more like roommates than husband and wife. So, we work on it. Lisa's voice rose despite her efforts to keep it low. We go to counseling. We take that trip to Europe. We remember why we fell in love in the first place. We don't just give up. I don't want to work on it anymore, Lisa. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of going through the motions. I want something different. The word different carried implications that made Lisa's stomach turn. Is there someone else? David's hesitation was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. That's not what this is about. That's not what I asked. Lisa, please. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. But it was already as hard as it could possibly be. Lisa looked around the parking lot, at all the happy families celebrating their children's achievements, and felt completely alone. Her son's graduation day, which should have been filled with joy and pride, had become the day her marriage ended. I need to go, she said, her voice surprisingly steady given the chaos in her mind. Jake is waiting. We need to talk about the logistics. Not now. Lisa's voice was firm, stronger than she felt. Not today. Today is about Jake. She walked toward their car on unsteady legs, her mind reeling from the conversation. Jake was leaning against the passenger door, his phone in his hand, but he looked up as she approached. Mom? You look pale. What's wrong? Lisa forced a smile, the same practiced expression she'd worn earlier in the auditorium. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Your father and I just had to discuss some boring adult stuff. Are you ready for dinner? Jake's eyes searched her face, and she could see he wasn't entirely convinced. But he was 18, officially an adult as of today, and he deserved to celebrate his achievement without being burdened by his parents' problems. Where's Dad? Lisa glanced back to see David walking slowly toward them, his own phone now pressed to his ear. He's coming. Work call. As they drove to the restaurant, Lisa sat in the passenger seat while David drove and Jake chattered excitedly about graduation parties and summer plans. She watched familiar neighborhoods pass by the window, the same streets she'd driven Jake to school on, the same parks where they'd played as a family, the same life she'd built over nearly 2 decades. Everything looked the same. But everything had changed. At the restaurant, Lisa ordered Jake's favorite meal and listened to him talk about his friends' college plans, their summer jobs, and the freedom that awaited them all. She laughed at his jokes, asked questions about his stories, and took pictures of him with his graduation cap next to his steak dinner. To anyone watching, they looked like a normal family celebrating a milestone. But underneath the surface, Lisa's world was crumbling. Every bite of food tasted like cardboard. Every smile felt forced, and every laugh seemed to echo hollowly in her chest. She kept glancing at David, searching for signs of the man she'd married, but finding only a stranger who'd chosen the worst possible moment to destroy their family. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Jake pulled out his phone to text his friends about meeting up later. Lisa realized this might be one of the last times the three of them would sit together as a family, and the thought nearly broke her composure. I love you, sweetheart, she told Jake as he hugged her goodbye in the restaurant parking lot. I'm so proud of the man you've become. I love you too, Mom. Thanks for everything. Really. I know I don't say it enough, but you've been amazing. Lisa held him tighter than usual, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne and trying to memorize the feeling of his arms around her. In just a few months, he'd be gone to college, and her daily life would be forever changed. But she'd expected that change to be bittersweet, not devastating. The drive home was silent, except for the radio playing softly in the background. Jake had taken his own car to meet friends, leaving Lisa and David alone for the first time since the conversation, in the parking lot. Neither of them spoke, but the weight of unspoken words filled the space between them. When they arrived home, David went straight to his office while Lisa wandered through the house they'd shared for 15 years. Every room held memories. Jake's, first steps in the living room, birthday parties in the kitchen, Christmas mornings around the tree in the corner. She'd always thought they'd grow old in this house, maybe become grandparents here, watch Jake bring his own children to visit. Now, she wasn't sure what would happen to any of it. The morning after Jake's graduation dawned gray and humid, with thick clouds hanging low over the suburban landscape. Lisa woke up on the couch, still wearing the clothes she'd put on the night before, her neck stiff from sleeping at an awkward angle. For a moment, she forgot where she was and why she wasn't in her bed, but then the memories came flooding back, like a dam bursting. David wanted a divorce. Her marriage was over. Jake's graduation day had been the beginning of the end. She could hear movement upstairs. David getting ready for work as if nothing had changed. The normalcy of it struck her as absurd. How could he shower and shave and put on his work clothes when their entire world had shifted on its axis? How could he maintain his routine when hers had been completely shattered? Lisa pushed herself, up from the couch, her body protesting the uncomfortable sleeping position. Her reflection in the hallway mirror showed mascara smudged beneath her eyes, her carefully styled hair from yesterday now a tangled mess. She looked like a woman who'd had her life turned upside down, which was exactly what she was. The coffee maker gurgled to life in the kitchen, its automatic timer ensuring that David would have his morning caffeine regardless of personal crises. Lisa found herself grateful for the small consistency, pouring herself a cup and wrapping, her hands around the warm ceramic mug. The simple act of drinking coffee felt like an anchor to normalcy, something familiar in a world that had suddenly become foreign. "Lisa?" David's voice came from the top of the stairs. "We need to talk before I leave for work." She closed her eyes, steeling herself for another difficult conversation. "I'll be right there." David was sitting on the edge of their bed when she entered the room, his work clothes crisp and professional. He looked well-rested, as if he'd slept peacefully while she'd spent the night staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of everything. "How are you feeling?" he asked, and the question struck her as almost comical in its inadequacy. "How do you think I'm feeling, David? My husband told me he wanted a divorce at our son's graduation. I'm devastated." He nodded, his expression remaining frustratingly neutral. "I know the timing wasn't ideal." "The timing wasn't ideal?" Lisa's voice rose before she could stop it. "You destroyed the most important day of our son's life. You turned what should have been a celebration into a nightmare. The timing wasn't just not ideal, it was cruel. I thought it would be better, to be honest, rather than pretend everything was fine. We both know it hasn't been fine for a long time." Lisa sank into the chair by the window, the same chair where she'd nursed Jake as a baby, where she'd read him bedtime stories, where she'd helped him with homework countless times over the years. We could have worked on it. Marriage counseling, date nights, communication. There are so many things we never tried. "Lisa, I've been thinking about this for over a year. I've tried to make it work in my head, but I can't. We want different things. You want to keep everything the same, and I want something different." "What do you want that's so different?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. David's silence stretched between them, confirming her worst fears. There was someone else, someone who represented the different life he was seeking. The knowledge sat in her stomach, like a stone, heavy and indigestible. "I think I should stay in a hotel for a while," he said finally. "Give us both some space to process this." "You're leaving today?" "I think it's for the best. I'll pack a bag and we can figure out the details later. I'll still pay all the bills, of course. I'm not going to leave you stranded." The casual way he discussed dismantling their life together made Lisa feel sick. 20 years of marriage reduced to logistics about bills and hotel rooms. "What about Jake? He's going to notice you're not here." "He's 18, Lisa. He's about to go to college anyway. This is probably the best time for him to adjust to the idea of us being separated." "The best time?" Lisa stood up, pacing to the window and back. "There is no best time for your parents to get divorced. None of this is good for Jake. Staying in an unhappy marriage wouldn't be good for him either. So you decided for all of us that we were unhappy? Without discussing it, without giving me a chance to understand what was wrong or try to fix it?" David stood up, reaching for his suitcase from the top shelf of their closet. The sight of him packing made everything feel final in a way that their conversation hadn't. This was really happening. He was really leaving. "David, please, can we at least try counseling? One session? If you're determined to end this, can't you at least give me that much?" He paused in his packing, a stack of shirts, in his hands. For a moment, Lisa thought she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a crack in his resolve. But then, he shook his head and continued folding clothes. "I'm sorry, Lisa. I really am. But my mind is made up." Lisa watched him pack with growing numbness. 20 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, with efficient packing and apologetic but firm declarations. She'd always imagined that if their marriage ever ended, it would be after years of fighting, after trying everything possible to save it. She'd never imagined it would end with such quiet finality. "I'll be staying at the Hampton Inn on Route Y9, David said as he zipped up his suitcase. "You can reach me there or on my cell if you need anything." "If I need anything?" Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. "I need my husband. I need my marriage. I need my life to make sense again." David's expression softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. "I know this is hard, but in the long run, we'll both be happier." After he left, Lisa stood in their bedroom looking at the empty space where his suitcase had been. The room felt cavernous, too big for one person, filled with the echoes of a shared life that was now ending. She could smell his cologne lingering in the air, see the indentation on his pillow, notice all the small signs of his presence that would soon be gone. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Thanks again for yesterday. Heading to the beach with friends. Home for dinner?" Lisa stared at the message, trying to figure out how to respond. How did you tell your 18-year-old son that his father had moved out the day after graduation? How did you maintain the facade of normalcy when your world was falling apart? She typed back, "Have fun. Your dad might be working late, but I'll make your favorite pasta." It wasn't a lie, exactly. David might be working late. He just wouldn't be coming home afterward. The house felt oppressively quiet without the sounds of David's morning routine. No shower running, no coffee cup clinking against the counter, no morning news playing on the kitchen television. Lisa wandered from room to room, noticing how empty everything felt, even though nothing had physically changed. She found herself in Jake's room, looking at the graduation cap hanging on his bedpost and the acceptance letter from Northwestern, still tacked to his bulletin board. In just a few months, he'd be gone too, leaving her truly alone for the first time in her adult life. The thought was terrifying. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. Margaret Chen's name appeared on the screen, and Lisa almost didn't answer. She wasn't ready to explain what had happened. Wasn't ready to put words to the destruction of her marriage. "Hi, Margaret." "Lisa, how are you feeling today? I bet you're exhausted after all that excitement yesterday. I know I am, and Tom's not even my oldest." "I'm tired," Lisa managed. "It was a big day." "It really was," Tom said. "The after party was amazing. Did Jake have fun?" I saw him at the beach this morning when I was running, and he looked happy. He's having a great time with his friends. At least that was true. At least Jake was happy. How are you and David handling the empty nest preparation? I imagine it's hitting you both pretty hard. Lisa closed her eyes, gripping the phone tighter. We're adjusting. Well, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to call. I know how overwhelming this transition can be. Maybe we can grab coffee this week. I'd love to hear more about Jake's plans for Northwestern. That sounds nice, Lisa said, though she wasn't sure how she'd manage to have a normal conversation about anything. I'll call you. After hanging up, Lisa realized she'd need to start thinking about how to handle the social aspects of divorce. Margaret and the other neighborhood friends, Jake's friends' parents, the couples they'd socialized with for years, they'd all need to be told eventually. The idea of having those conversations over and over again made her feel exhausted. She spent the rest of the morning mechanically doing laundry and cleaning the kitchen, tasks that usually brought her satisfaction, but now felt pointless. Who was she cleaning for? Who was she taking care of? The purpose that had driven her daily routine for so long was evaporating, leaving her unsure of how to fill the hours. Around noon, her sister called from California. Amanda was 2 years younger and had never married, building a successful career in marketing instead of the traditional family life Lisa had chosen. They'd always been close, despite the physical distance and different life paths. Hey, big sister. How was Jake's graduation? I've been thinking about you guys all morning. Lisa's composure, carefully maintained all morning, finally cracked. The sob that escaped her was raw and painful, carrying all the grief and shock she'd been trying to suppress. Lisa? What's wrong? What happened? David wants a divorce, Lisa managed between tears. He told me yesterday right after the ceremony. He's already moved out. Oh, honey. Oh, Lisa, I'm so sorry. What happened? I thought things were going well with you two. So did I, Lisa whispered. I mean, I knew we'd grown apart since Jake got older, but I thought that was normal. I thought we'd reconnect once he went to college. I never thought David was this unhappy. Have you talked about counseling? Maybe this is just a midlife crisis thing. He won't even consider it. He says his mind is made up. And Amanda, I think there's someone else. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds before Amanda spoke again. What makes you think that? The way he's been acting lately? Working late, secretive with his phone, emotionally distant, and when I asked him directly, he didn't deny it. That bastard, Amanda said with feeling. Lisa, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to fly out there? I can be on a plane tonight. No, you don't need to do that. I need to figure out how to handle this myself. Jake doesn't even know yet. You're going to tell him? I have to. David moved out this morning. Jake will notice when he comes home for dinner. How are you going to explain it? I have no idea. Lisa wiped her eyes with a tissue, trying to pull herself together. I've been a wife and mother for so long. I don't know how to be anything else. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. You're going to figure it out, Amanda said firmly. You're stronger than you know, Lisa. You've always been the one who held everything together for everyone. Else, now you get to figure out what you want for yourself. I want my marriage back. I want my family intact. I want Jake to have both his parents under the same roof when he comes home from college. I know you do, sweetheart. But if David's made his choice, you can't control that. You can only control how you respond to it. After they hung up, Lisa sat in her quiet house and tried to imagine a future that didn't include David. She'd met him when she was 22, fresh out of college and working her first job at a marketing firm. He'd been confident and charming, with big dreams about starting his own construction company. She'd fallen for his ambition and his laugh, the way he made her feel like she was the most important person in the room. They'd married 2 years later, and Jake had been born when Lisa was 25. She'd left her job to be a stay-at-home mother, a decision they'd made together and one she'd never regretted. Raising Jake had been the most fulfilling work of her life, watching him grow from a curious toddler into the confident young man who'd walked across that stage yesterday. But somewhere along the way, she and David had stopped growing together. They'd focused so intensely on being good parents that they'd forgotten how to be partners. And now, with Jake leaving for college, they were left with the empty shell of a relationship neither of them had tended to properly. The garage door rumbled, open around 3 o'clock, and Lisa heard Jake's voice calling out a greeting. She quickly checked her appearance in the hallway mirror, trying to erase any evidence of her crying. "Hey, Mom, the beach was awesome. We played volleyball for like 3 hours straight, and I think I'm going to be so sore tomorrow." Jake appeared, in the kitchen, his hair still damp from the ocean, sand clinging to his flip-flops. "That sounds like fun," Lisa said, grateful that her voice sounded normal. "Did you put sunscreen on?" "Of course I did. I'm not 12. Jake grinned and opened the refrigerator, surveying the contents with the focused intensity of a teenager who'd spent the day being active. "Where's Dad? I thought he'd want to hear about the party last night." Lisa's heart clenched. This was the moment she'd been dreading all day. "Jake, honey, can you sit down for a minute? I need to talk to you about something." The serious tone in her voice made Jake look up from the refrigerator, his expression shifting from casual to concerned. "What's wrong? You've been acting weird since yesterday. Did something happen?" "Your father and we're having some problems in our marriage." The words felt foreign in her mouth, like she was speaking a language she'd never learned properly. "He's decided he wants a divorce and he's staying at a hotel for a while." Jake's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a kind of resigned sadness that made him look older than his 18 years. "Are you serious?" "I'm afraid so. When did this happen?" "Everything seemed fine. Yesterday." Lisa struggled with how much to tell him. "Your father told me after the graduation ceremony. He's been thinking about it for a while, apparently." "He told you at my graduation?" Jake's voice rose with anger. "What kind of person does that?" "Jake, please don't be angry with your father. He's going through something, and sometimes adults make choices that don't make sense to other people. Don't defend him, Mom. That's seriously messed up." Jake slumped into a kitchen chair, running his hands through his hair. "Is this why he's been so weird lately? Working all the time and acting like he didn't want to be here?" Lisa was surprised by her son's perception. She'd thought they'd been hiding their marital problems better than they apparently had. "You noticed that?" "I'm not blind. You guys barely talk to each other anymore. I just thought maybe you were stressed about me leaving, for college or something." "We are stressed about you leaving," Lisa said softly. "But that's not why this is happening." "Is there someone else?" Jake asked bluntly. "Because if there is, I need to know." Lisa hesitated, unsure how much truth an 18-year-old could handle. "I don't know for sure. Your father and I haven't discussed the details yet." "But you suspect there is?" "Yes," she admitted quietly. Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, Mom. This sucks. For you, I mean. This really sucks." "I'm sorry too, sweetheart. I know this isn't what you wanted to deal with right after graduation. Are you okay? Like, really okay? Because you look like you haven't slept." Lisa almost laughed at her son's concern. Here she was, the adult who was supposed to be taking care of him, and he was worried about her well-being. "I'm not okay right now, but I will be. I promise you that." "What happens now? Are you guys going to try to work it out?" Your father doesn't want to try counseling or anything like that. He says his mind is made up. Jake's jaw tightened, and Lisa could see David's stubborn streak reflected in their son's expression. So that's it? 20 years of marriage and he just decides it's over? I know it's hard to understand. No, Mom, it's not hard to understand. It's just really selfish. Jake stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. What about you? What are you going to do? It was the question Lisa had been asking herself all day, and she still didn't have a good answer. I honestly don't know. I've been a wife and mother for so long, I'm not sure what comes next. You're going to be fine, Jake said with surprising conviction. You're the strongest person I know. Dad's the one who's making a mistake here. Lisa felt tears threatening again, but this time they were mixed with pride. Somehow, despite the chaos of the past 24 hours, she'd raised a son who could offer comfort and support when she needed it most. That had to count for something. Love you, Jake. More than you'll ever know. I love you too, Mom. And I'm not going anywhere, okay? I mean, I'm going to Northwestern, but I'm not abandoning you. We're going to figure this out together. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange kind of limbo. Jake called his father, and Lisa could hear the tension in their conversation from the next room. David tried to explain his decision, but Jake wasn't having any of it. Their relationship, which had always been solid, was clearly strained by David's choices and timing. He wants to take me to dinner tomorrow, Jake reported after hanging up. Just the two of us. I think he wants to explain himself or something. You should go, Lisa encouraged, despite her own hurt feelings. He's still your father, and you deserve to hear his side of things. Do you really want me to have dinner with him? What I want is for you to have a good relationship with both your parents, regardless of what happens between your father and me. This divorce is between us, Jake. It's not between you and him. That evening, Lisa made Jake's favorite pasta as promised, and they ate dinner together while watching a movie. It was almost normal, except for the conspicuous absence of David's place at the table and the weight of unspoken concerns that hung in the air between them. Later, as Jake got ready to go out with friends, he paused at the front door. Are you sure you're going to be okay tonight? I can stay home if you want. Absolutely not, Lisa said firmly. You're 18 years old, you just graduated, and you should be celebrating with your friends. I'll be fine. But after Jake left, the house felt more silent than it ever had before. Lisa found herself wandering from room to room, looking at family photos and wondering which ones she'd take if she had to move out. The thought of leaving this house, where she'd raised her son and built her life, was almost unbearable. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the back deck, looking out at the garden she'd spent years cultivating. The roses were in full bloom, and the vegetable patch was thick with summer growth. She'd always found peace in gardening, but tonight, even the familiar sight of her flowers couldn't calm her racing mind. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. How did Jake take the news? Lisa stared at the message for several minutes before responding. About as well as you'd expect. He's angry with you. I figured he would be. I'll talk to him tomorrow. Good luck with that. There was a long pause before another message came through. Lisa, I know you hate me right now, but I hope you can understand that this is for the best. We've both been unhappy. Lisa's fingers trembled as she typed her response. Don't tell me how I've been feeling. You made this decision without me, so don't try to make it about both of us. I'm sorry. You're right. Are you? Sorry, I mean. Or are you just saying that because you think it's what I want to hear? This time, David didn't respond at all. Lisa finished her wine and went inside, locking the doors and turning off the lights. The house felt different at night now that she was alone. Not scary, exactly, but unfamiliar. She'd always been comfortable with solitude, but this wasn't chosen solitude. This was abandonment, and the distinction felt significant. In the bedroom, She looked at David's empty side of the bed and made a decision. If she was going to be alone, she was going to do it on her own terms. She gathered his remaining clothes from the dresser and closet, stuffing them into garbage bags with more force than necessary. She stripped the bed and put on fresh sheets, rearranging the pillows so the bed looked intentionally made for one person, rather than missing someone. It was a small act of reclaiming her space, but it felt important. If David wanted to leave, she wasn't going to preserve a shrine to their marriage in her own bedroom. As she prepared for bed, Lisa caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked older than she had just 2 days ago, as if the stress had etched itself into her face overnight. But there was something else there too, a flicker of determination that surprised her. Maybe Amanda was right. Maybe she was stronger than she knew. Maybe this ending could also be a beginning, though she couldn't yet imagine what that might look like. For the first time since David's devastating announcement, Lisa felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there, and for now, that would have to be enough. 3 weeks after David moved out, Lisa sat in the parking lot of Community Legal Services, gripping her steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The building looked innocuous enough. Red, brick, professional signage, landscaped entrance. But she knew that walking through those doors would make her divorce feel official, in a way that David's departure hadn't. Margaret Chen had recommended the lawyer, speaking in hushed tones over coffee about how Barbara Wilson specialized in helping women navigate divorce after long marriages. "She's tough but fair," Margaret had said, "and she really understands what it's like to start over at our age." Lisa had put off making the appointment for as long as possible, hoping that David would change his mind, that he'd realize the magnitude of what he was throwing away. But he hadn't contacted her except for brief, business-like texts about bills and Jake's college expenses. The silence spoke louder than any declaration could have. The law office's waiting room was decorated in soothing blues and grays, with landscape paintings and comfortable furniture that was probably designed to put nervous clients at ease. Lisa filled out paperwork with shaking hands, documenting 20 years of marriage in checkboxes and short answers. Married, June 15th, 2004. Children, Jake Martinez, 18. Reason for divorce, irreconcilable differences. Mrs. Martinez? A woman in her 50s appeared at the reception desk, wearing a navy blazer and a kind but professional smile. "I'm Barbara Wilson. Please, come back to my office." Barbara's office was larger than Lisa had expected, with law, books lining the walls, and a mahogany desk that suggested success and confidence. Family photos were scattered across a credenza. Children at various ages, graduation ceremonies, weddings, evidence of a life well lived despite what must have been countless difficult divorces handled in this very room. "I know this is overwhelming," Barbara said, settling behind her desk with Lisa's file. "The first meeting always is. But I want you to know that you're in control here. We're going to take this at your pace, and we're going to make sure your interests are protected." "I still can't believe I'm here," Lisa admitted. 3 weeks ago, I thought my biggest problem was going to be empty nest syndrome. Tell me about what happened." Lisa found herself recounting the story of Jake's graduation, David's announcement, and the surreal days that had followed. Barbara listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression remaining neutral and professional. "Has your husband filed papers yet?" Barbara asked when Lisa finished. "I don't think so. He keeps saying we need to work out the details, but he hasn't actually done anything official. That gives us some time to prepare. Let's talk about your financial situation. Do you work outside the home?" "No. I haven't worked since Jake was born. David's construction company supports us." The words felt strange in her mouth. David's company, David's income, David's decision to leave. When had she become so financially dependent that her entire security rested on someone else's choices? "We'll need to get a clear picture of all marital assets, the house, his business, retirement accounts, investments." Do you have access to financial records? Lisa nodded, though she realized she knew embarrassingly little about their actual financial situation. David had always handled the money while she managed the household and Jake's needs. It was a division of labor that had worked for 20 years, but now left her feeling vulnerable and unprepared. I want you to gather everything you can find. Bank, statements, tax returns, business records if possible. The more information we have, the better we can protect your interests. What should I expect? What happens next? Barbara leaned forward, her expression gentle but direct. That depends partly on your husband and partly on what you want. If he files for divorce, we'll respond appropriately. If he doesn't, you might consider filing yourself rather than waiting indefinitely. The idea of Lisa initiating divorce proceedings felt surreal. She was still hoping for reconciliation, still believing that David might come to his senses and realize what he was throwing away. But she was beginning to understand that hope might be naive. How long does it take? In cases like yours, where there are significant assets and a child involved, it can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on how cooperative both parties are. 2 years. Lisa tried to imagine living in limbo for 2 years, not quite married but not quite divorced, caught between a past she couldn't save and a future she couldn't envision. I need to ask about something else, Barbara said carefully. You mentioned suspecting there might be another woman. If that's the case, it could affect the proceedings. Lisa's stomach tightened. I don't have proof. It's just a feeling. Sometimes, feelings are based on real observations. Has his behavior changed in ways that suggest he might be involved with someone else? Working late more often, secretive with his phone, emotionally distant. Classic signs, I guess. Saying it out loud made it feel more real and more humiliating. If there is someone else, and if marital funds were used to support that relationship, it could be relevant to asset division. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, focus on gathering financial information and taking care of yourself. After the meeting, Lisa sat in her car again, this time feeling drained rather than nervous. The lawyer had been kind and competent, but the conversation had made the reality of divorce feel inevitable, in a way it hadn't before. She was really going to have to rebuild her life from scratch at 43 years old. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake. How did it go with the lawyer? She typed back. Informative. I'll tell you about it when you get home. Jake had been her lifeline over the past 3 weeks, checking on her constantly, helping with tasks around the house, and providing emotional support that should have been coming from her husband. She felt guilty about leaning on her 18-year-old son, but she was also grateful for his presence during the most difficult period of her life. David had taken Jake to dinner twice since moving out, conversations that Jake reported were awkward and unsatisfying. David kept insisting that the divorce was for the best, that everyone would be happier in the long run, but he couldn't seem to explain why he'd given up on their marriage without trying to save it. He's different, Mom, Jake had said after their second dinner. Like, he looks the same and sounds the same, but it's like he's playing a role or something. He keeps talking about being authentic and living his truth, which doesn't even sound like him. Lisa suspected the new vocabulary was coming from someone else, someone who was influencing David's perspective on their marriage and his responsibilities. The thought made her feel sick, but it also made her angry in a way that felt almost energizing. That evening, Lisa decided to take Barbara's advice about gathering financial information. She'd always left the money management to David, trusting him to handle their finances responsibly while she managed everything else. But now she needed to understand exactly what their 20 years of marriage had produced in material terms. She started with the filing cabinet in David's home office, a room she rarely entered except to dust and vacuum. The files were meticulously organized, labeled with David's neat handwriting: taxes, insurance, house, investments, business records. It was the life of a responsible middle-class couple, documented in manila folders and careful record-keeping. The tax returns told a story of steady financial growth. David's construction company had done well over the years, their income rising from modest beginnings to comfortable middle-class stability. They owned their house outright, having paid off the mortgage 2 years early. Their retirement accounts were healthy, and they had college savings for Jake that would cover most of his Northwestern expenses. On paper, they looked like a successful American family. But Lisa knew that financial stability meant nothing if the emotional foundation crumbled beneath it. She found the business records particularly enlightening. David's company was worth more than she'd realized, with steady contracts and a solid reputation in their area. If they divorced, she'd be entitled to half of everything they'd built together, including his business equity. The thought of profiting from the destruction of her marriage felt wrong, but she was beginning to understand that she needed to be practical about her future. Her laptop chimed with an email notification, and Lisa saw David's name in her inbox. Her heart raced as she opened the message, hoping for some sign that he was reconsidering his decision. Instead, she found a formal message about Jake's college expenses and health insurance coverage. It was businesslike and efficient, addressing practical concerns without any acknowledgement of the emotional devastation he'd caused. Lisa stared at the screen, feeling the last of her hope for reconciliation drain away. If David could communicate with her like she was a business associate, rather than the woman he'd shared his life with for 2 decades, then their marriage was truly over. The realization was painful but also clarifying. She needed to stop waiting for him to come back and start figuring out how to move forward without him. Lisa spent the next hour researching divorce attorneys online, reading reviews and comparing credentials. Barbara Wilson had impressed her, but she wanted to understand her options. The websites were full of advice about protecting assets, establishing custody arrangements, and starting over after divorce. It was a whole industry built around the dissolution of marriages, and Lisa found herself reluctantly grateful that such resources existed. Around 10 o'clock, Jake came home from a night out with friends, looking happier than he had since graduation. "Hey, Mom, how was your evening?" "Productive, actually. I've been looking at our financial situation and learning about the divorce process." Jake sat down across from her at the kitchen table, his expression growing serious. "How bad is it? Financially, I mean." "It's not bad at all. Your father has built a successful business, and we have decent savings. Even if we split everything 50-50, I'll be financially secure." "What about the house?" Lisa had been wondering the same thing. "I don't know yet. We might have to sell it, or I might be able to buy out his half if I want to stay. There are a lot of variables." "Do you want to stay?" It was a question Lisa had been avoiding, but Jake's direct approach forced her to consider it honestly. "I'm not sure. This house holds so many memories, mostly good ones. But it might be too big for just me, and maintaining it alone could be expensive." "You don't have to decide right now," Jake said gently. "But Mom, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I support you. If you want to move somewhere smaller, or even to a different city, I think you should do what makes you happy." "What makes me happy?" Lisa realized she hadn't thought about her own happiness in years. Her identity had been so wrapped up in being a wife and mother that she'd lost track of what she wanted as an individual. "I honestly don't know anymore." "Then maybe this is your chance to figure it out." That night, Lisa lay in bed thinking about Jake's words. Maybe this divorce, as painful as it was, represented an opportunity she hadn't recognized. For the first time in 20 years, she could make decisions based entirely on her own preferences and goals. The thought was terrifying, but also, unexpectedly, a little exciting. She pulled out a notebook and began making lists, things she'd always wanted to do but had put off for family responsibilities. Travel to Europe, take art classes, learn a new language, volunteer for causes she cared about, maybe even go back to school or start a career. The list grew longer as she wrote, and Lisa realized she'd been suppressing dreams and ambitions for years without even acknowledging it. She'd been content with her role as wife and mother. But perhaps she could be more than that. Perhaps she could be herself, whoever that turned out to be. For the first time since David's announcement, Lisa fell asleep feeling something other than grief and fear. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was possibility, and that felt like progress. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Lisa was having coffee and reading the newspaper when her phone rang, displaying David's office number. "Lisa? It's me." David's voice sounded strained, less confident than usual. "What's wrong?" Despite everything, her first instinct was still concern for his well-being. "I need to tell you something, about why I want the divorce." Lisa's heart began to race. "Okay. There is someone else. Her name is Rachel, and she works in my office. We've been involved for about 8 months. The confirmation of her suspicions hit Lisa like a physical blow, even though she'd been expecting it. Hearing it stated plainly made it real in a way that speculation hadn't. 8 months, she repeated numbly. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. And Lisa, I'm in love with her. I know that's hard to hear, but I needed you to know the truth. In love. David was in love with someone else. Someone named Rachel who worked in his office and had been sharing intimate moments with Lisa's husband for 8 months. While Lisa had been planning Jake's graduation party and worrying about empty nest syndrome, David had been falling in love with another woman. How old is she? Lisa heard herself ask. That's not important. How old, David? 29. 29. Lisa was 43, and David was 45. His girlfriend was closer to Jake's age than to Lisa's. The cliché of it was almost more insulting than the betrayal itself. I see. Lisa, I know this is painful, but I wanted you to hear it from me rather than finding out some other way. Rachel and I are serious about each other. We're talking about moving in together. After 8 months. I know it seems fast, but when you know, you know. The phrase, when you know, was one David had used when he proposed to Lisa, 21 years ago. Hearing him apply it to another woman felt like being stabbed with a knife that had once been used to cut their wedding cake. I have to go, Lisa managed. Lisa, wait. I want us to be able to talk about this like adults, for Jake's sake, if nothing else. You want to talk about this like adults? Lisa's voice was rising despite her efforts to stay calm. You want to be adult about the fact that you've been cheating on me for 8 months while I planned our son's graduation and worried about our marriage. You want to be adult about the fact that you're sleeping with someone who's barely older than our child? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Lisa was standing now, pacing around the kitchen with nervous energy. You had an affair, David. You cheated on your wife and destroyed your family for a woman young enough to be your daughter. Don't try to dress it up as some great love story. I'm sorry you're hurt, but this is why I want the divorce. We can't keep doing this. We're not doing anything. You're doing this, all by yourself, and expecting me to be understanding about it. Lisa hung up before David could respond, her hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. 8 months. While she'd been worried about their communication problems and planning romantic dinners that David kept canceling for work, he'd been building a relationship with someone else. The betrayal was complete and devastating. But underneath the pain, Lisa felt something else. Relief. David's confession had freed her from the guilt she'd been carrying about their marriage's problems. She'd been blaming herself for not being interesting enough, attractive enough, or attentive enough to keep her husband happy. But the truth was that David had simply chosen to cheat rather than work on their problems together. She called Barbara, Wilson's office, and scheduled an emergency appointment. It was time to stop being the victim of David's choices and start making some choices of her own. 4 years later, Lisa stood in the same auditorium where her world had fallen apart, but everything was different now. The red velvet seats were the same, the stage was familiar, but the woman she'd become bore little resemblance to the devastated wife who'd sat here watching her son graduate from high school. Northwestern University's graduation ceremony was grander than Westfield High's had been, with hundreds more graduates and families filling the much larger venue. Lisa wore a tailored emerald green dress that she'd bought specifically for this occasion, not because anyone expected her to look good, but because she wanted to celebrate how far she'd come. "Mom, you look amazing," Jake said as he adjusted his graduation cap in the mirror of their hotel room. At 22, he'd grown into the confident young man she'd always known he would become. But there was something else there now. A protective quality that had developed after watching his mother rebuild her life from scratch. "Thank you, sweetheart. You clean up pretty well yourself." Lisa straightened his tassel with maternal pride, remembering all the times she'd performed this same gesture before school photos and important events. Some things never changed, and she was grateful for the constants in her life that had remained steady through all the upheaval. "Is Dad coming?" Jake asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly enthusiastic about the prospect. "He said he'd be here." Lisa kept her voice neutral, as she'd learned to do when discussing David over the past 4 years. "Rachel too, I assume." Jake's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of his father's wife. David and Rachel had married 18 months after the divorce was finalized, in a small ceremony to which Jake had been invited, but Lisa, obviously, had not. Jake had attended, out of obligation, but had made it clear to both his parents that he found the entire situation uncomfortable. "You don't have to sit with them," Jake said. "I mean, if you don't want to." "I'll be fine," Lisa assured him, and she meant it. The woman who would have been devastated by sharing Jake's graduation with David and his young wife was gone, replaced by someone who had learned to navigate difficult situations with grace and self-respect. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. The first year after David moved out had been the hardest of Lisa's life, filled with lawyer meetings, financial negotiations, and the painful process of disentangling 2 decades of shared life. There had been nights when she'd cried herself to sleep, days when she'd felt paralyzed by the uncertainty of her future, and moments when she'd wondered if she'd ever feel whole again. But somewhere in the midst of that darkness, she'd begun to rediscover herself. It started small, taking an art class at the community college, joining a book club, volunteering at the local animal shelter. Activities that were purely for her own enjoyment, not because they served her family's needs or fit into her role as wife and mother. The divorce settlement had been more generous than Lisa had expected, partly because David's guilt over the affair had made him less aggressive about protecting his assets. She'd kept the house, received half of his business equity, and secured alimony that would allow her to live comfortably while she figured out what came next. What came next turned out to be a return to college. At 44, Lisa had enrolled in a master's program in art therapy, combining her natural empathy with her rediscovered love of creative expression. The coursework was challenging, but she'd thrown herself into it with the dedication of someone making up for lost time. "I'm proud of you, you know," Jake said as they prepared to leave for the graduation ceremony. "Not just for going back to school, but for everything. The way you handled the divorce, the way you built a new life. You're kind of amazing." Lisa felt tears threaten, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me." "I'm serious. When Dad first told us he wanted a divorce, I was so worried about you. You seemed so lost, like you didn't know who you were without him. But look at you now. You're successful, you're happy, you have your own life. Meanwhile, Dad's..." Jake trailed off, but Lisa knew what he wasn't saying. David and Rachel's marriage, which had begun with such passion and certainty, had proven to be less stable than anyone expected. The age difference that had seemed exciting during their affair had become problematic in daily life. Rachel wanted to travel and party, while David was dealing with the responsibilities of a middle-aged man with a college-age son and aging parents. Lisa had heard about their problems through Jake, who tried to remain neutral but couldn't hide his observations about his father's relationship. David looked tired during their visits, older than his years, and seemed to regret some of his choices, even if he'd never admit it directly. "Your father made his choice," Lisa said diplomatically. "I hope he's happy." And surprisingly, she meant it. The anger and hurt that had consumed her during the early days of the divorce had faded into something closer to indifference. David was no longer her problem to solve or her happiness to maintain. He was simply Jake's father, a man she'd once loved, who was now living his own life while she lived hers. The graduation ceremony itself was a celebration of achievement and possibility. Lisa watched with pride as Jake walked across the stage to receive his degree in engineering, his future bright with opportunities she'd helped make possible. But she also watched with an awareness of her own accomplishments. She'd raised this remarkable young man, survived the devastation of divorce, and rebuilt her life according to her own values and dreams. David and Rachel were seated several rows away, and Lisa caught sight of them during the ceremony. David looked distinguished in his navy suit, his hair now more gray than brown, while Rachel appeared young and slightly out of place among the parents and families. They weren't sitting particularly close together, and Lisa noticed that David kept checking his phone even during the most important moments of the ceremony. After Jake received his diploma, families gathered outside for photos and congratulations. Lisa was taking pictures with Jake when she spotted David approaching, Rachel trailing slightly behind him. "Congratulations, son," David said, embracing Jake with genuine warmth. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Dad." Jake's response was polite, but not particularly enthusiastic. "Lisa," David nodded in her direction, his expression carefully neutral. "You look well." "Thank you. So do you." It was a polite lie. David looked tired and somewhat uncomfortable, especially next to his much younger wife, who was clearly impatient with the family dynamics. "Jake tells me you're finishing your master's degree soon," David continued, making conversation with the awkwardness of former spouses who were trying to be civil for their child's sake. "Next month, actually. I'm doing my thesis on art therapy for trauma survivors." That's really great, Lisa. I'm glad you found something you're passionate about." There was something in his tone that made Lisa look at him more closely. Was that regret she heard? Recognition of what he'd lost when he'd chosen his affair over their marriage? It was hard to tell, and ultimately, it didn't matter. David's feelings about their divorce were no longer her concern. "Excuse me," Rachel interjected, checking her own phone with obvious impatience. "David, we need to get going if we're going to make our dinner reservation." "Of course." David's response was automatic, but Lisa caught a flicker of irritation in his expression. "Well, congratulations again, Jake. I'm really proud of you." As they walked away, Lisa heard Rachel complaining about the heat and wondering how much longer they had to stay. David's responses were patient, but strained, and Lisa found herself feeling almost sorry for him. He'd given up a 20-year marriage for passion that seemed to have faded into everyday annoyance and incompatibility. Well, that was awkward, Jake observed once they were out of earshot. "It wasn't too bad," Lisa said honestly. "We're all just trying to figure out how to be family in a different way." "Are you okay? Seeing them together, I mean?" Lisa considered the question seriously. 4 years ago, the sight of David with another woman would have devastated her. But now, watching him manage his young wife's complaints and obvious discomfort, she felt nothing stronger than mild curiosity about how different their lives had become. "I'm fine," she said, and realized she truly meant it. "Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm happy." They spent the rest of the afternoon celebrating with Jake's friends and their families, taking photos and sharing stories about college experiences and future plans. Lisa found herself laughing more than she had in years, enjoying the company of other parents who were proud of their children's achievements and excited about their own next chapters. That evening, Lisa and Jake had dinner at a quiet restaurant near their hotel, just the two of them. It was their tradition now, celebrating important moments together without the complications of extended family or romantic relationships. Jake was leaving for a job in Seattle the following month, and Lisa knew their relationship would continue to evolve as he built his adult life. "So what's next for you, Mom?" Jake asked over dessert. "After you finish your master's degree, I mean." "I've been thinking about opening my own practice," Lisa admitted. "Art therapy for women going through major life transitions. Divorce, empty nest syndrome, career changes, helping people rediscover who they are when their old identities don't fit anymore." "That sounds perfect for you. You've basically lived through all of that yourself." "Exactly. I want to help other women realize that ending isn't the same as failure, and that sometimes you have to lose yourself before you can find yourself." Jake smiled. Deep thoughts from Mom. "Your old mom has learned a few things over the past 4 years. You're not old. You're, 47? That's not old. Sometimes I feel ancient, and sometimes I feel like I'm just getting started. It's strange how that works." "I think you're just getting started," Jake said with conviction. "I mean, look at everything you've accomplished since the divorce. You went back to school, you're about to start your own business, you bought that cute little townhouse, you're happy. Dad, on the other hand, what about your father? He seems miserable, to be honest. Rachel complains constantly. They fight about money, and he keeps talking about feeling like he made a mistake. Not about the divorce necessarily, but about thinking that starting over with someone younger would solve his problems." Lisa felt a complex mix of emotions hearing this. Not satisfaction exactly, but perhaps validation that her instincts about the sustainability of David's new relationship had been correct. Marriage is hard work, regardless of age. If you're not willing to put in the effort, it doesn't matter who you're with. "Do you think you'll get married again?" The question caught Lisa off guard, though she'd been asked it before by well-meaning friends and family members. "I don't know. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not looking for it either. I've learned that I can be happy on my own, which makes me think that if I do find someone, it'll be because I want to share my life with them, not because I need them to complete me." That sounds healthy. It took me a while to get there. For the first couple of years after the divorce, I thought something was wrong with me, because I wasn't desperate to find another husband. But I've realized that I actually enjoy my independence. I like making decisions without having to consult anyone else. I like being able to travel when I want, decorate my house the way I want, spend my time on things that interest me. "You've changed a lot," Jake observed. "In a good way. You seem more confident, more yourself." "I am more myself. It's funny. I thought losing my marriage meant losing my identity, but it actually helped me find it." After dinner, they walked around the campus, where Jake had spent 4 transformative years. The buildings were beautiful in the evening light, and the atmosphere was festive with graduation celebrations happening throughout the area. Lisa felt a deep sense of satisfaction, watching her son in this environment where he'd thrived and grown into the man she'd always hoped he'd become. "I have something for you," Jake said, as they sat on a bench overlooking the lake. He pulled a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Lisa opened it to find a silver bracelet with a charm in the shape of a phoenix. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was perfect. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I saw it and thought of you, rising from the ashes and all that." Jake helped her fasten it around her wrist. "I wanted you to have something to remind you of how strong you are." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of gratitude and pride. "I love it. And I love you." "I love you too, Mom. More than you know." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Lisa reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 4 years ago, she'd thought her life was ending. David's request for a divorce had felt like a death sentence, the destruction of everything she'd worked to build and maintain. But sitting here now, watching her son prepare to launch his own independent life, Lisa realized that David's betrayal had actually been a gift in disguise. It had forced her to discover strength she didn't know she possessed, to pursue dreams she'd set aside, and to build a life that was authentically hers rather than a compromise between her needs and someone else's. The next morning, Lisa packed, her suitcase in the hotel room while Jake prepared for his post-graduation brunch with friends. She was flying back to Boston that afternoon, returning to her townhouse in Cambridge in the final month of coursework that would complete her master's degree. Her life there was nothing like the suburban existence she'd shared with David. The townhouse was smaller but filled with light, decorated with her own artwork, and furnished according to her preferences rather than compromise. She had a circle of friends from school and her volunteer work, women of various ages who were all navigating their own transitions and supporting each other through the challenges. "I'm going to miss having you so close," Jake said as he helped her carry her bag to the lobby. In the fall, he'd be moving to Seattle for his new job, while Lisa would be establishing her art therapy practice in Boston. It would be the first time since his birth that they'd lived in different time zones. "We'll talk every week," Lisa promised. "And you'll come home for holidays. Besides, Seattle isn't that far. I might even come visit and finally see the Pacific Northwest. I'd like that. Maybe we can take a road trip or something." In the hotel lobby, Lisa spotted a familiar figure near the front desk. David was checking out, his suitcase beside him, but Rachel was nowhere to be seen. He looked tired and somewhat disheveled, as if he hadn't slept well. "Jake," David called out when he saw them. "I'm glad I caught you before you left. I wanted to say goodbye properly." Father and son embraced, and Lisa could see the genuine affection between them despite the complications of the past 4 years. David had made mistakes as a husband, but he'd always been a good father to Jake, and that relationship had survived the divorce intact. "Take care of yourself, Dad," Jake said, "and congratulations on yesterday. I know you're proud." "I am. Very proud." David's eyes moved to Lisa, standing a few feet away with her luggage. "Lisa, could I speak with you for a moment, privately?" Jake looked between his parents uncertainly. "I'll wait in the car," he said diplomatically, taking Lisa's suitcase with him. Lisa followed David to a quiet corner of the lobby, curious about what he wanted to say. They'd exchanged pleasantries at the graduation ceremony, but they hadn't had a real conversation in over a year. "How are you?" David asked, and something in his tone suggested the question was more than polite small talk. "I'm well. Really well. Actually, how are you?" David was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not just for the affair or the way I handled the divorce, but for not appreciating what we had when we had it." Lisa studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives, but she saw only genuine regret. "Thank you for saying that. It means something, even now. I've been thinking a lot lately about the choices I made, about what I threw away." David's voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "Rachel and we're having problems, big problems, and I keep thinking about how different things might have been if I'd put the same energy into our marriage that I put into the affair." "David, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know it's too late for us. I know I burned that bridge completely. I just wanted you to know that I realize what I lost. You were a good wife, Lisa. A good partner. And I was an idiot to think I could find something better." Lisa felt a complex mix of emotions hearing his confession. Part of her, the part that had loved him for 20 years, felt sad that he'd learned this lesson too late to save their marriage. But the larger part, the part that had built a new life from the ashes of their divorce, felt only a mild pity for the man who had destroyed something precious, because he'd thought the grass was greener elsewhere. "I hope you can work things out." "With Rachel," Lisa said, and she meant it. "But David, even if you can't, don't spend the rest of your life looking backward. I spent 2 years doing that, and it was exhausting. At some point, you have to accept that the past is gone and focus on building something better going forward. Is that what you've done? Built something better? Lisa smiled, thinking about her townhouse filled with her artwork, her graduate program that challenged and fulfilled her, her plans for starting her own practice. Yes, I think I have. It's different from what we had, but it's mine in a way that our life together never really was. I'm glad, David said, and she believed he meant it. You deserve to be happy. So do you. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, two people who had once shared everything now reduced to polite conversation and carefully chosen words. But there was a sense of closure in it, a final putting to rest of the anger and hurt that had defined their interactions for years. I should go, Lisa said finally. Jake's waiting, and I have a flight to catch. Of course. And Lisa, thank you for everything, for raising Jake to be the man he is, for handling the divorce with more grace than I deserved, for being who you are. Lisa nodded, accepting the gratitude that felt long overdue. Take care of yourself, David. In the car, Jake was quiet as they drove toward the airport. Lisa could see him processing the conversation he'd witnessed, trying to understand what it meant for the family dynamics that had defined his young adult life. Was that weird? He asked finally. Talking to Dad like that? A little, Lisa admitted. But it was good too. I think we both needed to say some things. Do you think he regrets the divorce? I think he regrets how he handled it. But Jake, even if your father regrets his choices, that doesn't change anything for me. I can't unknow what I know about his affair, and I can't go back to being the person I was before all this happened. Nor would I want to. Because you like who you are now better. I like knowing that I can take care of myself. I like having independence and autonomy. I like pursuing my own interests and making my own decisions. If I ever get involved with someone again, it'll be because I choose to share my life with them, not because I need them to complete me. At the airport, Jake walked Lisa to security, carrying her bag and making sure she had everything she needed for the flight home. I'm really proud of you, Mom, he said, as they prepared to say goodbye. Not just for going back to school or starting your business, but for becoming this person. You're stronger than you were when you were married to Dad. Thank you, sweetheart. That means the world to me. And I'm proud to be your son. Lisa hugged him tightly, memorizing the feeling of his arms around her. In a few weeks, he'd be moving across the country, starting his own independent life. It was exactly what was supposed to happen, the natural progression of parenthood. But it still felt monumental. I love you, Jake, more than you'll ever know. I love you too, Mom. As Lisa settled into her airplane seat for the flight back to Boston, she looked out the window at the city where her son had spent 4 transformative years. Soon, he'd be in Seattle, building his career and perhaps finding love and starting a family of his own. The thought filled her with pride and excitement for his future, but she was also excited about her own future in a way that would have been impossible 4 years ago. In a month, she'd complete her master's degree. In the fall, she'd open her own practice, helping other women navigate the major life transitions that had once seemed so overwhelming to her. She had plans to travel to Europe, the trip she and David had talked about for years but never taken. She had friends and interests and a life that was entirely her own creation. The plane lifted off, carrying her back to her new life, and Lisa smiled as she watched the ground fall away below her. 4 years ago, sitting in that high school auditorium as her marriage imploded, she couldn't have imagined that David's betrayal would lead to the best version of herself she'd ever been. But that's exactly what had happened. The ending of her. Marriage had been the beginning of her real life. The life where she was the author of her own story, rather than a supporting character in someone else's. David had asked for a divorce thinking he was taking something away from her. But instead, he'd given her the greatest gift possible. The chance to discover who she really was, when no one else's needs and expectations were defining her. As the plane climbed higher into the afternoon sky, Lisa touched the Phoenix charm on her new bracelet and thought about the conversation she'd have next week with her thesis advisor, the clients she'd soon be helping through their own transitions, and the life she was building one choice at a time. David had wanted a divorce, and he'd gotten one. But Lisa had gotten something even better. She'd gotten herself back. And that, she realized with deep satisfaction, was the last word in a story that had begun with devastation, but ended with triumph. 4 years after the worst day of her life, Lisa Martinez was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because someone else had chosen her path, but because she had chosen it herself. And that made all the difference in the world. The woman who had once defined herself entirely through her relationships with others had become someone who knew her own worth, pursued her own dreams, and built her own happiness. She'd learned that sometimes the most devastating endings were actually the most liberating beginnings, and that the courage to start over could lead to a life more authentic and fulfilling than anything she'd imagined possible. As the plane carried her home to her new life, Lisa smiled and began planning her next chapter. There would be many more to come, and for the first time in her adult life, she was the sole author of her own story. It was a powerful feeling, and she intended to make the most of it.